Danny Garcia, hyped or hated? Terrence Bud Crawford. Is he keeping it real, or is he just fooling himself? Let's keep it simple. Let's talk boxing, common sense. It's nocturnal thoughts, what's happening. First of all, I gotta speak on Danny Swift Garcia. Is he hype? Is he it seemed like either people hype Danny Garcia or they hate Danny Garcia. Versus, why don't you just look at it and call a spade, give the man his credit and critique the man, credit him for his abilities and critique him for his shortcomings. He's a good fighter. He's a fundamentally sound fighter, but he has flaws. And I don't understand where this idea of him having this great amount of power is coming from. It's hype on one hand, but then it's hate on the other hand. And I choose to do neither one. I give the man his credit and then I call it how I see it. He's a good fighter. He has heavy hands. He has decent power in both hands. But I don't see this astronomical ability to knock people out like a Mike Tyson-esque type of power, or a Gervonta Tank Davis type of knockout power, or even a Jamar or Jamel Charlo or a Deontay Wilder type of knockout power. You don't want to just sit there and stand in front of him and get caught with a big hook. But I don't see this unexplainable type of knockout power from Danny Garcia. Where was all this knockout power when he was fighting against Mauricio Herrera? You know, on one hand, you got Danny Swift Garcia losing a close razor-thin match against Sean Porter, who I believe Sean Porter outworked him. And he lost a razor-thin close match against Keith Thurman. Once again, I think Keith Thurman outworked him. And you want to, of course, you can't cry about spilled milk and say we just got a bad decision and it's politics in boxing. When I'm watching you, politics go in your favor when you lost, in my opinion, a razor-thin fight against Mauricio Herrera. Could have went either way, but to me, Herrera gave you some work, gave you the business. Another close fight you had where it could have went either way, but I thought you got outboxed in the later rounds, was against Lamont Peterson. So where was your power? Where was all that knockout, astronomical power against Herrera and Lamont Peterson and Keith Thurman and Sean Porter? Where was that huge knockout power even against Ivan Redkach, who looked like he was on the verge of getting knocked out by Gervonta Tank Davis in headgear, who's a smaller man? Herrera was a smaller man. Sean Porter, a smaller man. You know, bulky built, but you had advantages on Sean Porter. How was he getting in so many jabs? So either you get some people hyping up Danny Garcia, like he has this extreme knockout power, when fighting Amir Khan. Yeah, he knocked Amir Khan on his butt, but Amir Khan, finished that fight on his feet. He was about to get knocked out, but it wasn't just like this one hitter quitter where Danny Garcia touched you with this hook and it's lights out like when Canelo hit Amir Khan. Danny Garcia hit Amir Khan. Amir Khan got up staggered and wobbly, but he still was on his feet. The only person I really seen him knock out in devastational fashion was because Adrian Granados, with this big fucking head that was a huge target, who pretty much stands right in front of you and comes forward and is custom made to get knocked out by a Danny Garcia. Good fighter, strong, heavy hand, you know what I'm saying, Philly tough. I think he gets the credit he deserves. I don't think he should be overrated or underrated. He's a good fighter. And I think he has a good fighter's chance, as any man does. Once they get inside that square circle, anybody has the chance to have the best fight of their life against Errol Spence. But I'm not going to hype it up like, you know what I'm saying, he's just so dangerous. You know, the question out there really is how Spence is going to be in his recovery, but we're not going to go deep into the whole Spence versus Garcia fight because I already made my prediction. Go check it out on my last video. I made my prediction on Errol Spence versus Garcia. I just want to say I give credit to Danny Garcia. I think he's a good fighter, but I don't understand how on one hand he's just getting hyped up and the other hand he's getting hated, because I don't see the reason to hate this man either. Like, I don't see, he always comes to fight. He always puts it all out there. He's in close battles. He does have power. He does have a charisma about himself. He's a businessman. He seems like he's a family man. A close relationship with his mother, his father, his sisters. I don't see what's there not to like about Danny Swift Garcia. I just look at it from when you get the best fighting the best, you get a Danny Swift Garcia versus Errol the True Spence. I think Errol Spence is going to come out on top, pre or post accident. So that's not hating on Danny Swift Garcia. I give him his credit. I like to see him. I like to watch his fights. I like to see his fights. But I'm not going to hype the man up either. So I don't understand it. Somebody explain it to me. Leave a comment. Why is it hype or hated? Why it can't just be, you know what I'm saying, the real deal, legit, call a spade a spade. Now let's move on to Terrence Bud Crawford. Is he delusional or is he brutally honest? Because I can't see on one hand how he can say something I can totally get down with and agree with when he says, I don't want to fight Errol Spence post, you know, his first fight back from accident, because I don't want to have the built-in excuses why I don't get my full credit for winning the fight, because people are just going to say, oh, he's, you know, damaged from the accident. I understand that as a warrior, you want to fight your opposition at 100%. I get that, and that makes perfectly good sense. And on the same hand, I can still see when he says, when little Gary Russell Jr. was calling him out, calling him all kind of BITCHs and talking about how he slapped him and broke his jaw and punked him out and made him hush his mouth and things like this. I can see how you can say, I ain't gonna get no credit for fighting Mr. Gary Russell Jr. He's too small. I'll break his neck in a street fight. I can agree with that. But on the other hand, I cannot see how Terrence Bud Crawford, as a welterweight, can't acknowledge that every person he has faced as a welterweight has come with some kind of stigma or asterisk or blemish or handicap type of situation. Like coming into the welterweight division and fighting Jeff Horn. Jeff Horn was a big guy, a bull Russian type of guy, very one-dimensional, straight up and down, no special effects like Floyd Money Mayweather said. But he didn't even have the power. Like when Floyd Money Mayweather said that, he was talking about Triple G. At least Triple G got that knockout power. You know, Jeff Horn didn't even have knockout power. He just was like a poor man's version of Sean Porter before Sean Porter added the wrinkles to his game. Jeff Horn just comes in, bulldozes, headbutts, and swings wild. And he definitely outworked Manny Pacquiao the first half of the fight. Not to mention, Manny Pacquiao came into his backyard. And from the second half of the fight, he busted Jeff Horn all up. A lot of people thought that was a robbery. I thought the judges had it on the money as far as I would have gave it to Pacquiao because Pacquiao definitely did the most damage. But at the same time, Pacquiao should have known you come into this man's backyard, you don't wait to the last half of the fight to put the pedal to the metal, put the foot on the gas and start to pummel this guy. Because the first half of the fight, you let him pretty much push you around and kind of manhandle you. He didn't do real good damage. He didn't have pinpoint accuracy punches. He didn't land big shots on Manny Pacquiao, but he definitely had the ring generalship and was able to, you know, establish some sort of dominance over Manny Pacquiao the first half of the fight. So I said, okay, Jeff Horn, he legitimately got a good call in his home turn, even though he was all busted up. So he showed the lack of skills. And of course, Terrence Bud Crawford, with his ability to switch hit and his instincts and his reflexes, he should be able to outbox and knock out Jeff Horn. So you're not going to just get put up on this high pedestal in the welterweight division for beating a one-dimensional Jeff Horn, who basically got a gift fight against Manny Pacquiao, who walked out the ring all busted up. You got to say, yeah, I won against Jeff Horn. He's a big guy, strong guy, but he doesn't bring a lot of skills to the table. As Terrence Bud Crawford, the same man that said, I don't want to fight Spence with built-in excuses. Then, at the same time, you fight a Jose Benavidez. How can you not say you struggled with this guy up to the last round and not admit that this guy had a brace on his knee from an old gunshot wound that you could tell would never totally be able to recover from, by the way he moved, by the way his movement was not fluid. It was not up on his toes, not bouncing. He had the height, but he was able to give you a tough go as a one-legged fighter. And I don't see how Terrence Bud Crawford can't say Jose Benavidez was tough. He rugged. He had all that little reach advantage. But at the same time, he is fighting with an obvious bad knee. He got a bad knee. I know about having a bad knee. You're not going to be 100% with a bad knee, with a bad leg. It's just not going to happen. And Terrence Bud Crawford should know that. Nobody comes into the fight 100%, but when you got a brace on a gunshot wound and a bad knee, you got to say, man, I beat this man, but he's not at his optimal ability of performance because of an injury from some street beef or whatever. And then you got to say, you fight Amir Khan. Come on, man. You can't say and admit Amir Khan didn't really come to fight. He was already a broken fighter, way past his prime, overrated, glass chin, and he quit. And he quit. And I would say, I wanted the best version of Amir Khan. Just like you say you want the best version of Errol Spence. You don't want the best version of Amir Khan, who was completely knocked out by Canelo Alvarez and knocked down multiple times by Danny Garcia and came into the ring, took a couple of shots and quit. The only legitimate fighter you have is a fighter that nobody ever really heard of. Agitas Kovlauskas, the Mean Machine. And he knocked you down in the third round. And he had been on the couch, on the bench, out of commission for like a year layoff. So even the Mean Machine, somewhat of a journeyman from Lithuania, who nobody really even ever heard of, I thought he had power. I thought he had brute strength, but he didn't have, you could tell he didn't have stamina, but he had brute strength, and he was taking advantage of that brute strength in the first 4 or 5 rounds. I mean, in the third round, he legitimately knocked you down. And I can't see how you can admit that and say, Agitas Kovlauskas was tough. I'm not going to give full credit for fighting him because he's not a household name. But at the same time, this dude is tough. He came ready to fight, but he didn't come with a 12-round ability to go with me. He fought hard until he ran out of gas, and I took advantage and knocked his ass out. Nothing wrong with saying that. Don't try to boast up a man and be like, you saying I ain't never fought nobody. What about Agitas Kovlauskas? And not say at the same time, not saying, it's like a rapper coming out rapping about making all this money selling drugs and not telling you about the downside of selling drugs, like going to jail and getting shot and, you know what I'm saying, your family going through hell because you want to be a dope boy. It's like a rapper just glorifying somebody and not talking about the other side. And at the same time, at the end of the day, I can't see how Terrence Bud Crawford wants to get full 100% credit for fighting a Kell Brook at this point in Kell Brook's career. You can't tell me that the same man that's saying I don't want to fight Errol Spence with a built-in excuse can't see the built-in excuses for Kell Brook. Kell Brook, in his prime, was a beast and a true beast at welterweight. Errol Spence did not get full credit for beating Kell Brook because Kell Brook was coming off of an injury from fighting Triple G. So when he fought against Errol Spence, even though Errol Spence broke the other side of his orbital bone and put him on a bended knee, even Roy Jones said, I see what I'm looking at, I think I know what I'm looking at, but I can't base it totally off of Kell Brook because Kell Brook was sort of damaged goods. Now he's double damaged goods. Now he's weight drained, and he comes into the ring with zero punch resistance. As a champion, you have to say that Kell Brook was a shell of himself, and I'm not going to take full credit for knocking this guy out with a hybrid half of jab punch when he had poked up my eye, almost looking like it was on the verge of being Triple D Dubois from 1 or 2 rounds of a half of a man, half of a you know, the shell of itself version. The ghost of Kell Brook was punching you in the eye. You switched to southpaw, and then you was able to hit him with a half a jab and send him flying across the ring. That's fugazi. And you should be able to admit, I don't like the way that fight turned out, just like you shouldn't like the way the fight Americana turned out. David Benavidez, the only full credit you should be taking is Gita's coach. I just don't see how you're not seeing this for yourself. You know what I'm saying? I don't see how you're not seeing this for yourself. So, at the end of the day, one more thing I gotta say before I say the end of the day. Last thing I gotta say, I'm gonna cut this video right off at 20 minutes and get out y'all way. Kell Brook. Salute to Kell Brook. But Kell Brook, if anybody's like my age, remember like watching the Spider-Man cartoon and reading Spider-Man comic books, Kell Brook is like the villain on Spider-Man when he makes like his 3rd and 4th appearance. You know, when Spider-Man first fights, the first time he sees a new villain, like the first time he fights Dr. Octavius, or the first time he fights Venom, or the first time he fights Carnage. You know, like the first time they fight, he just can't beat him. And he's like, you know what I'm saying, takes a whole 2 episodes to be continued. Takes a whole 2 episodes to figure out for Spider-Man to beat him. That's Kell Brook. Kell Brook was the first time you seen the Venom, or the first time you seen the, you know what I'm saying, Dr. Octavius, or the first time you seen Mr. Mysterious. By the time he got to Terrence Bud Crawford, Kell Brook was like when you see that same villain, the 3rd or 4th time he just comes in and make a cameo, and Spider-Man can beat him, you know what I'm saying, in the first 5 minutes of the episode. Like, you take a villain that was unbeatable for 2 or 3 episodes, had to be continued, and then all of a sudden, now, this same villain has to team up. You got to get Venom and Carnage to fight Spider-Man, and he handled both of them in half an episode. That's what Kell Brook was. Kell Brook was like a villain that's been defeated multiple times and brought down to such a level that he don't even last a whole episode. He come in, he rob a bank, and then 5 minutes later, Spider-Man comes and beat him up like an average Joe. That's what Kell Brook is now. And Terrence Bud Crawford, who makes sense on one hand when it comes to Errol Spence, talking about the across the street, and the across the street situation. I hear so many people that's wanting to hate on Errol Spence and say, oh, he's the first person that ever made up across the street. Like, Errol Spence versus Terrence Bud Crawford is the first time it was ever hard to make a fight. Since the beginning of boxing, it's always been hard to make the fight. People act like, you know what I'm saying, it was easy to make the Muhammad Ali versus George Foreman fight. They act like it didn't take forever. It got postponed and George Foreman was about to leave, and act like it didn't take forever to make Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. Like, that wouldn't all tie it up with Muhammad Ali, you know what I'm saying, not being able to fight, not having this license. And, you know, all fights since when Jack Johnson was the champion, I forget that the great white hype they was trying to come out of retirement, I forget his name, to come and fight Jack Johnson. That took so long to get that fight together. It takes, look how long it took for Mayweather and Pacquiao to happen. It always takes a long time for these fights to come together. So to act like it's something new for Terrence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence to be getting procrastinated on and trying to say, oh, that means Errol Spence don't want to fight me. It don't make no sense. And then for him to say, why it seemed like these fighters only call me out once they lose. Keith Thurman wasn't calling me out until he lost. Okay, I'll give you that. Sean Porter really wasn't calling me out until he lost. Okay, I'll give you that. But at the same time, they calling you out now. So why not fight a Keith Thurman? Why not fight a Sean Porter? You know what I'm saying? Why not? Who cares if they had reservations about fighting you in the past? Fight them now. That's all I'm going to say. I'm out. Nocturnal Thoughts. Peace. Salute.